think we're good. Yeah, if you don't mind, just to see. That's a lot better. Let's see if Mary can see us. All right, how you guys doing? Sleepy? Hungover? No? A little bit. Okay, cool. So today we're going to focus on Git. I think it's super important for us to maneuver through pooling our codes and collaborating with each other faster. But it's also really important for things inside of this class. Like anything you do from this point on, even outside of iOS development, it'll be super helpful for us to quickly and easily be able to spin up backups, load our places, right? We already went to the benefits of Git. And I feel like source tree has been a big hurdle for everyone in the class, myself included, because it's been so unpredictable in its actions. And going through command line, getting comfortable with command line is one of those very important tools, not just with iOS, but with, again, everything we do on Mac or Linux or even Windows. So we're going to start with command prompt, which is what's on the screen right now. It's just my black command prompt. I'll go over to access this later. And then we'll go into Git. So command prompts, has anybody here ever tried to play with it? So we load it through terminal, through utilities terminal in our applications. But command prompt is essentially a textual representation of our graphical user interfaces that we have through iOS. So through OS X, too many operating systems going on. Mac, Apple, build their operating system on top of Unix, just like Linux, just like iOS, just like Android. These are all Unix-based systems. And they have user interfaces, which essentially shoot commands to the Unix system, but they have, again, another layer, right? Remember in iOS, we're going through UIKit, there's similar layers in OS X that interact with the system, right? So terminal gives us direct access to our system. Of course, we still have to play by our operating system's rules, but it gives us a much quicker access to get around. And it is infinitely modifiable. We can write scripts to do anything in just a few keystrokes. And all the keystrokes we'll go through today, they're all defaults, but we can write shortcuts to everything. Not shortcuts, I'll show you some of my shortcuts to everything we do through terminal. And after you get a bit proficient, it's much easier to navigate through terminal than it is to navigate through Finder and our graphical user interface. Now, that takes time, but in my opinion, it's time that's well worth it. Of course, I'm also a bit biased because I spend all the days here. So there's a few commands I want us to go through, but there's the essentials, which I want to write down, so you have kind of a high-level view of everything that we're going to be going over. So the number one basic that we're going to go over is changing directories. CD. We're going to figure out where we are in our system tree. So figure out our place. In directory structure. We're going to learn to create files. Remove files. create directories, remove directories, and then just be able to look at all the files in a directory, so list files. And then we'll go from there, depending on how far we get and how the conversation goes. But these are the very basics that we'll need to operate and move around our operating system. Questions on this? Cool. So if you can go ahead and load up Terminal, there's two ways. If you press Command space, it'll bring up Spotlight, and you can start typing Terminal. The second way is to go through Applications, Utilities, Terminal. There's also other terminal tools. One good one is iTerm2. There's really not much difference anymore. Terminal's come a long way, but iTerm2 gives like a better way to do a find. But I'm just using the basic terminal. Another big note here is, let me load up my screen sharing. My terminal looks a bit different than yours, the color scheme. You can change the color scheme through Terminal and then Preferences. And then there's some other modifications we could do, which I can go over a bit later after the basics. All right. So does everybody have something like this in white? Most likely, right?
Yeah. Bash.
Yeah, so this is Bash. This is our command line. So let's figure out where we are, because mine at least just has a $sign, right? So I don't know where I am in the system, what's going on, it's just a $sign, it's not very telling. So the way we tell, we ask the system where we are is PWD. And that means post working directory or print working directory. So two things to notice. Number one, you'll see users/Tediconda. This is almost always our working directory, our home directory. So home directory is where we have OS X is basically built-in users. Again, it stands from Unix, and there is a user-based system. So everything that we have in our system is under our user folder. So the user folder is also known as a home folder. So when you log in, users/Tediconda is a home folder. If I shared a computer with someone else with a different account, users/Joe Schmo would be their home folder, right? And there's permissions, but I'm gonna go into permissions. So my home folder is users/Tediconda. The other way we can access that is through the tilde sign. Tilde almost always means home. And you'll see how that works in a second.
Sorry, I started off with the last login and had some information, and it won't let me delete it. And every time I try to hit enter to do something new, it just keeps telling me about my Giovanna's Mac program. Does that make sense? Not can't seem to do this.
Oh, which one?
So either one. So if I try to post something, and it keeps letting me get some information.
I'm sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right.
It's okay. Yeah, so for me, I have a $sign. For you, it might have something else up there. It might probably your username or a time username. So we know where we are now through PWD, right? So for us to list all of our files, because we want to be able to see the files that we have available in this directory for us to commit any actions, we list the files. So we do ls, that lists everything. And I have mine color coordinated. For mine, blue are directories, white or gray are files. Most likely for you, it'll be the same color. However, the way you know the directories is there's no extension on the file name. There's no period usually. So this lists the files in my current directory. Now, very often, especially when we work with Git, there's hidden files. The way that Git works is it saves the revision history through a hidden file called periodgit.git. And hidden files in Mac and actually all Unix-based systems are prepended by a period. So when we do a list, we don't see our hidden files. To look at our hidden files, we do ls-a. So ls is our main command, and almost always our commands will have helper commands, and the de facto way to do that is with a dash and then the options. So if you want to get help about a certain command, you do ls-h or -help, or sometimes help is --help, but the dash means there's additional options or attributes that we could stack onto this command. Right, so now we see I have a whole bunch of hidden folders and files, right? They're prepended by a period. There's one more view I want us to go through. So right now we see the files and folders, but this isn't very helpful if I want to figure out, if I want to look at the latest files or latest folders. So we can also do a list view. So I can do -l, ls-l, and that lists everything with all the information about the user, the date, and the permissions. ls-l.
And that gets you to more.
That gets you this view, which gives us a list view of all of our files with additional information. So I'll write all these down so you guys also have a cheat sheet. Okay.
I assume that DRWXR is something like read and write, directory, read, write permissions.
Yeah, so this is like full permissions here, pretty much. I don't want to go into permissions today. If you have questions about those,
Sure.
talk about the fine. But yeah, you can set permissions to this as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. I'm just curious what that meant.
Yeah, it's read, write for directories, files. Actually, it means for everything.
What's the column next to the number of files?
That's a good question. No. It's a group, so there's users and groups. So Unix-based systems have groups. This second folder, it's a good question. I need to check that, I don't recall. Yeah, I need to double check that. So we have pwd, we have ls, list files in directory, ls-a, list all files in directory, ls-l, list files in directory in list form with more info. Now we can also stack options, so I can do ls-al, so it lists all files in list format. So I'll make it a bit smaller because it might be. There we go. Yeah. So it's okay, we're in terminal. So if you open Spotlight, command space, and then type in terminal. Okay. So how do I print my current directory? How do I find out where I am? pwd, and list all files. -a, yeah. And then all files in list format is -al, and I use -al all the time. Now, if for any reason you ever want to clear your screen, there's two ways to clear it. First way is just by typing clear and pressing enter. Just typing clear. And all that does is actually, it doesn't totally clear it. You can scroll up. It just clears your view. Or if you totally want to get rid of everything, you do Command K, and that clears everything, and you can't scroll back up. So Command K.
And you said that ls-a is hit all your hidden files?
List all your hidden files, including your non-hidden files.
Including what?
Your non-hidden files, so all files, period.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna PWD here so we know where we are. Cool, so now we should be in a good place once we start navigating to figure out where we are in the system and kind of do some operations to list the files within where we are. So I want to do a list files to see folders and files that are available so we can start navigating a little bit. So our system is really a whole bunch of directories working together, right? It's a whole bunch of files and directories. So you can argue that with anything meaningful you do, you usually open the file by changing directory and finding the file, right? So the very important command is a change directory command, and that is cd. And then you can enter the folder name. So I can go into, I'll go into projects, cd/projects. Now, one thing to note when you're typing cd in the folder name is if you start typing the name, actually this works with folders and files, you can autocomplete, and you should always autocomplete, you should never type the whole name of a file, it gets very maddening. So if I do cd pro, I can just press tab, and it autocompletes projects.
And CD stands for what?
Change directory. Now make sure you're not doing projects. You might not have a project folder in yours.
Right, I'm just trying to get my.
So one thing to note is if you just type in the first two letters and you have two folders or two files that have the same first two letters, you have to be more specific. No, I'm sure you could override it, but it's not very strict. Oh, well, that's why. So cd/music, for example. Oh, probably no, sure. It's case sensitive. So. Oh, it is case. Oh, so you were in. Okay, so you're in multi one. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it is case sensitive, guys. So you. So let's go in one directory. So let's go to like voices. So you type in capital V.
So where are the actual project directories that get entered?
These are all directories you can enter. They're all because they don't have any extensions. Space. So you're picking a directory to go to, but it's case sensitive. So it could be capital V, for example, for voices. Then you can just press tab. So it completes, press enter, it should now be in projects. So if I do pwd, it tells us I'm in users, Steadicon.projects, right? Any questions about this so far? The change directory? So we can now go into directory. The way we go back to directory is we do cd space period period, and that goes back to where we came from. Actually, let me correct that because we can have absolute paths we go through. We can say, I want to go into this directory far in the structure, and it can be very specific. It doesn't only have to be in this context. So cd period period brings you to the parent directory of the current directory. So my parent directory of projects is my home folder, Tediconda. So cd space period period brings me back to my home folder.
So if you were in, like, let's say you had another folder within projects, like project 1, and you did period period bring you back to Tediconda,
Nope.
not project.
Nope. So if I go, so I have Ziki in there. You see at the very bottom right here. So I do to cd zi ki, right? So now I do cd period period, and you see it brings back the projects because projects was the parent directory.
You could do, you could always do CD tilde, right? To go back to your.
Yeah. So if we do cd tilde, that brings us back in our home folder. It's a very important command to remember in case you ever get lost. And all of your files that you work on, they should all be in your home directory. Now we got this power to access our directories that are above our home directory, right, which are system directories. Don't ever create files there. All your files should be created in your home directory or children of home directories, folders within home directories. So you'll see probably your MLB class is probably within there, your downloads folder, your documents folder, desktop, etc., etc. So in command line, very often when we run things and test things, we'll be typing the same commands over and over again. We can actually bring back history of commands we've typed. So if you press up in command line, it'll bring up your last command. If you keep pressing up, you can go up in history in your commands. So up and down brings you up and down what you've typed in your command line.
Oh, this is a current terminal session, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You can also get that by just typing history. And you
Does
get,
does it remember both correct and faulty integers?
I believe so. That's a good question. I believe so. Let's check that. I'm not positive, to be honest. Yeah, it does. So up and down. I don't usually press history, but I all the time press up. Especially when you start typing long directories, right? So right now, the way we're moving through our directories is we go one directory at a time, right? So we go to Unison. I can list files here. I can go into, let's say, test, right? So now if I do pwd, we see that I'm deep in my home directory, right? I'm user, steady conduct, Unison, test, right? So what's really cool is I can copy this directory, this whole directory here. You have to highlight the whole thing and press Command C. I'll go back home, right? So I'm back home, and then this directory is 2 folders in. I can be very specific in where I want to go. So I can do CD space and paste the whole path. So I don't only have, I'm not restricted to only going up one directory at a time. I can save my whole path and do CD / space whole path. So it takes me back to Unison test. So where the history comes in really useful is if you're doing lots of this directory maneuvering, moving out to these long directory names, you can do just up and go back and forth between directories.
Can you save that as a shortcut?
You can. So I'll give you guys this is kind of beyond the scope of today because today's Get Focused. I'll give you guys a file you can do for your preferences where you can do shortcuts. But for me, for example, I have a shortcut to do C. It goes straight to there, right? Or you can do anything shortcuts. For me to go back directory, just do 2 periods. So you can do shortcut for anything. Or I can do, I remove that. Yeah, you can do a shortcut for any directory for any place. Yeah.
How did you get the full path again? Did you get CD?
So if you do pwd, that brings the full path of where you are. So you don't only have to do CD space current folder, you can do CD space the absolute location of where we are.
But in reality, like, you'd have to navigate there to print a working directory.
You navigate where?
Like, to get the full path, right? Like, you'd have to navigate there,
Sure.
but then you're already there.
Yeah, but then what if you have to go to another directory from there?
Oh, I see. Okay, then you.
Or maybe a lot of times the way terminal is very useful is you have processes like if you run tests or if you run like a server, you might want to run the server in one tab, and then you might want to run commands in another tab. So from another tab to get there, you can copy that first tab's directory. So initially, logically, it might be like, why would it's chicken before the egg problem, right? But there's tons of use cases for you doing that. Cool. So how do we go back directory?
Period.
CD period. As far as navigating and moving around, another very useful tip is we can actually open the current directory in Finder. So while we're getting acclimated to terminal, we don't have to go full in terminal, we can switch back and forth. So you can open the current directory in Finder by doing open space period. And this gives us a Finder window of where we are. Now, just the same, you can do open. Let me actually open a better file. Give me 1 second here. Let's see. So just like with open period, you can do open in the file name, and it opens the file in its default application. So if I do open NSURL Xcode project, should open this in Xcode. So open and file name will open the file in its default application. You guys have seen me do this, but when we have been debugging source tree, I've gone to terminal to figure out where we are and see what's going on with Git, right? And you've seen me go in terminal, type CD, and I've actually drag and drop the directory to terminal. So we can actually, if you want to get the path of a folder or a file, we can drag and drop the file straight in here. So if I do in my terminal, I do CD space, I can then drag and drop the folder right into here, and it prints the path as soon as I drop it. So this comes in very useful. But remember, if you're drag and dropping a directory to terminal to switch the directory, remember to type in CD first before drag and dropping the directory. Cool. Questions so far? Yeah.
When you open the file, that NSURL, that's a folder?
So this one, okay, here's a bit of a sidebar. Xcode projects, we go to file, new project. It's actually a file. We see it as a file when we double click it terminal, right? So if I open this up, we go in terminal, this is an Xcode project, right? We know this is a file, but an actual Xcode project is actually a folder of more files. Xcode recognizes it as a file, but in terminal, and don't do this because it might mess things up, but in terminal, I can actually go into the Xcode project, and we see that it has other files in there. It saves our user information, it saves our workspace. So you know how whenever you quit Xcode, it brings up all the windows as you have them arranged. It saves those here, and then it actually saves the project here. So your Xcode project is actually a folder, but when you open it through the user interface, it knows to open it through Xcode. Questions?
So I cleared it and it keeps going back to the folder that I dragged into the Git hiding. It keeps not coming back to the folder.
You can go back to your home folder by doing cd. Can someone tell me the home folder command? Tilde. Yeah. So the way back home is also tilde, always tilde.
We have to do the CD and then close, right?
Yep. Yep, exactly. Unless you're fancy and do a shortcut to just do tilde. Is anybody interested in these shortcuts? Yeah? Okay. So this is a sidebar. I don't want us to get this today, but if you want to ever edit your commands and the way terminal works, bash works, if you go to your home directory and do ls-a, you'll see over here there's something called the bash profile. So that's where you have all your settings. This is my bash profile. It's got, it looks very scary, but it really isn't that bad. Now, one thing you saw, and again, it's above the scope of this, just it's important to know that it's there. Our terminal comes with an editor called VI or Vim, and that's the de facto editor that Unix is built with. So they have a text editor that can open any file. Now you'll see over here in my bash profile, this alias means it's a shortcut. So if I do gcap and just git commit with a whole bunch of stuff here, right? So you can do a lot of commands through your Git profile. Okay, so let me clear this up. Yeah. Huh?
How do I get into my Git?
Your Git settings?
Yeah.
We can go over that for class. Right? Yeah. We haven't got to Git yet. Okay, so next, let's figure out how to create directories. Because when we create a new project, let's usually start with a directory, right? So I'm gonna do ls to listen to my files. So the way we create a directory is by mkdir. It means make directory. And then you give it a directory name. So I'll say this is mob git. Now what's really cool, you can actually stack directories. So you can build more than one at a time. So I can do mk git, mk command line, etc., etc. We'll create all those with one command. So if I do ls, I should now see mob git over here. Right? So mkdir is the command to make a directory. So how to navigate to my mob git directory? Mob git. Yep. There's an empty directory. So now we can create files. Yeah,
When you create a new directory, does it automatically create it in whatever folder you happen to be?
that's a good question. Yep. Yep. You can also tell it a very specific folder. So you can do users, Teddyconda, desktop, and directory. So it works exactly the same as change directory. It's either if it has no prefix directories, it creates it right here. But if you give it the full path, it creates it in that path that you gave it. So I can do something like make their tilde desktop and then random directory. This creates it within its location, right? And again, tilde, remember, it's users, Teddyconda. It's your home directory. So I can say home directory, desktop, random, Or I can say make dir random, and it just makes directory within our mobgit directory. Does that make sense? Exactly.
What's the last one? I'm sorry.
So if I do mkdir random, it creates a directory within this folder that we're in.
Right, because we were in.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to be very specific or relative to where we are. Question on this so far? Cool. So let's get creating some files. So the way we create a file is with touch command. We can give it a file name. You can have any extension. So I can say readme.txt. So now if I list, I have readme.txt. Or I can create multiple files at once. So I can say hello world.rb. RB is a Ruby extension. Or I can say hello.py. Py is a Python extension. Or world.txt, right? So I can create any file of any extension just with one command. So now if I do ls, we have all those files.
What was the touch thing again?
So that creates a new file. And then everything that proceeds is the file name of that file you're creating. And you can have multiple files. So I created a file hello world, hello py, and world.txt. Now, I would never start an Xcode project this way because Xcode, when you create an Xcode project file, it dumps a whole bunch of stuff in there. So the touch command is not good for that. But if you're creating a new repository and you're creating a README file, you can certainly go this route. Or if you're working in other languages, you can create it this way. Anything that's readable, that doesn't have a whole bunch of stuff, meta information at the top, that's a good way to create it. Question on touch command? So we don't really need these files. We don't work with Ruby, we don't work with Python. So I'm going to remove hello.py. So remove is rm, and then the file name. So I'll say hello.py. So now inside here, I'll create another directory just to test with. So I'm going to make a directory. mkdir, and I'll call this just test.
Just inside the mobgit.
Yep. So in mobgit we have these files and directories right here. So if I do remove just test, it's going to yell at us because it's not treated as a normal file. Remove is used for files, just remove. For us to remove the directory, we'll do rm-rf, and then the directory name. So what that means is, it means recursively and forcefully. So it doesn't remove a directory by rm because directory might have files in there, right? So it's saying, hey, you're making the assumption that you're going to remove this directory, but it has a whole bunch of dependencies inside, right? So recursively means that if there's directories in there, remove all the directories inside there recursively. Remove all the directories. And then forcefully means that, yes, I want to override the normal permission, remove it until I give you permission to remove it forcefully. So that was a long explanation. Just remember to remove directories is rm-rf and directory name. Now, a very, very, very dangerous command is to target everything in your directory is the star, the shift 8. So if you were to go in your home folder, you can do rm-rf and star, and this removes everything in your system. So don't ever do this, but I've seen some really bad advice online of people like spraying, like, oh, do this, and people actually doing that and like totally getting. So just remember, rm-rf star means something's being removed. So good practice is if anything online gives you the advice to do rm-rf, look very careful what it says. John?
When you're removing stuff in terminal, does it go to the trash can?
Nope. Good question. It doesn't.
It's just, it's gone.
It's gone.
Whoa. I make that mistake all the time.
Yeah. It's a bit more dangerous.
I only delete my trash can once a month.
Yeah.
I'm always thinking that.
Likewise. Likewise. However, the context of that is a bit different, right? Because when you're working with GUI, you're like, okay, I don't really need this, move it, move it, move it. Whereas you're working with terminal, you're working like file by file. So usually I don't have a problem. There's been like maybe twice ever that I've run into that. Because I don't ever find myself cleaning my hard drive through terminal. It's usually through Finder. That's the one thing I use Finder for. So rm-rf star, very dangerous. I'm gonna go ahead and do it right now so you guys could see. Basically cleared up my whole directory. So rm-rf remove directory. Now let me. It's something really useful.
So really just in like 3 strokes, if a hacker got into your computer,
Yeah.
they can clear your entire.
Because just like we have cd tilde to go back home, you do tilde// to go to your system directory, and then here we can do rm-rf boom, and remove everything, wipe out our whole hard drive.
You can type that in.
It's still there, right? There's no way to recover it.
Nope. No one to recover it.
It's not physically deleting it from the hard drive, it's just deleting it from the directory.
It's physically looking for a hard drive
Going for it.
forever, ever, ever, ever.
If you don't have the CI, how would they recover it?
You can.
Well,
Yeah. You can. Technically, there's like some traces of everything that you do, but you can't piece the file back together.
I'm still thinking.
Yeah, I didn't
I mean, it is still physically on the hard drive, right? We can't access it.
Now,
gone.
that star thing is a big eraser.
It's gone. Everything.
Yeah, like that. So within a few keystrokes, you can really mess up someone's computer, like Rob was saying.
Yeah, totally.
Why would you ever tell us this?
I wasn't thinking like that. That's on me.
I had so when you run servers online, you know, like websites, apps, most of the time they run on Linux, and the way you access them is the terminal. And then there's interfaces, but if you're doing like advanced stuff or anything with advanced settings, you always go to the terminal. I had an intern one time. I don't know what came through his head. I don't know if he read online or like if he was experimenting. He did rm-rf everything on a parent directory that owned like the whole thing, and totally removed the client's site. I mean, we have backups, thank God, but
Oh my god.
for my heart dropped for a good few minutes.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
How does one break that news? Oops.
But you see how easy it is. And this is, just one of those commands that, with terminal you can do really powerful things. Everything we've done could be automated to be one keystroke. So this is how people, like, if they get into a website through like a backend, they can just drop in one file and run a script that does all this through like one small file. It could be a file that's like, 5 bytes. It doesn't have to be a very large file because all I need is these commands.
Is that like a logic bomb? Or something? Logic business system just deletes everything.
Yeah. Now, usually when you have a website, again, this is beyond the scope of this, there's groups of permissions, and a website group only has access to itself, not to the whole server, set up correctly. But you never know. A lot of times, people just, if you hire an amateur, a lot of times they set system-wide preferences for the folder. So it could be pretty dangerous.
It's interesting when you use the super user do command, like usually, 'cause I've had to use that sometimes, and that does give you a prompt usually. It's like, are you sure you want to complete this? It's interesting that doesn't give you a prompt.
So if you do rmrf star from the main folder, it will make it that. So what Dave is talking about is, and actually we might run into this, that's good to go into that, thank you. A lot of times when you do an operation in terminal, and it says you might not have permissions, and usually it's because it's installing something in an important folder, you have to override the permissions or give yourself access through a super user account. And your accounts are most likely 90% super user accounts. So you just have to say, as a super user, do this action. So say we want to create a file, and it doesn't let us create a file. The way we go about it is we do sudo. It means super user do, and then the command you're trying to run. So super user do touch, or super user do whatever. And basically, this lets us execute our command with the highest permission in the system, with the admin permissions in the system. And then we'll ask you to type in your password. So if I do sudo touch test.txt, ask for my password. Now, you may have also noticed in the past, if we've been troubleshooting your system, if you type in your password, it will not fill anything out. It'll be invisible, but it will still type it. So as you type in your password here, it'll stay in one character, but just know it's still typing the password.
When you were saying that in the bash profile you can edit the commands, could you then put prompts for certain actions?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, terminal, you can customize it to anything imaginable. Now, one use case for sudo is very often you won't know to do something in sudo, to do something in admin privileges. So very often you'll do something like touch file or remove file or like install something, right? And it'll say, hey, you don't have sufficient permissions, do this again. To do it again, so you don't have to say the command is very long. Sometimes you have to type a very long, path to a folder or a very long command. So you have to do sudo on the long command again. To not do the last command, you do sudo space 2 exclamation marks, and this runs your last command with admin privileges. It's a little pro tip. So one thing we'll be playing with, we'll actually be forced to be exposed to command line later on, and I'm thinking about doing a workshop on this as well, is there's something called CocoaPods, which is essentially plugins for our applications. There's tons of plugins online. And the way that we install CocoaPods is through terminal. And in the process of installing things, we'll have to do things in admin user because we have to install Ruby updates and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we'll probably run into that later on. I think for that, I might just do a recording and send it to everyone for homework to review. What's that?
How do you get to the bash profile?
So that's in your home directory. So I'll go cd tilde to go home. And ls, it's a hidden file because it's .bash profile. So ls-a. And you can see it right here, dash _ profile. So for me to open it, I'm going to do vim.dash-profile. You'll see some of my shortcuts. So to go here, I did vim. This is, remember, our text editor that comes with terminal. And then the file name, bash profile. Dave asked how do I get there. So that's under home, the .dash profile.
I don't, mine's work computer, would that have been hidden, like, this version's been taken away?
Probably not. You don't see it?
No, I
Maybe-
don't have history.
Maybe it's not even created. It's very possible that you might not have any default settings.
Whoa.
Well,
I got something really weird.
yes, it wasn't created. But you can just create it. That would never be alpha settings.
How are you out?
Look at this.
Oh, yes. So if you got a vim, do colon Q.
Colon Q.
So this is the first time running vim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry about vim, guys. It's a whole different beast that even experienced developers don't really. It's a whole different world.
out of this too.
To get out of vim, you do colon and then Q.
Q?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Yeah, vim is
Colon Q.
yeah. Try colon Q and exclamation mark. You might have written something in there.
Speak.
That's your edit notes. Yeah. So vim is a bit tricky. Again, it's really useful if you have a few months to experiment with it. But it's got different modes. It's got modes for editing, modes for reading, modes for presenting. You create your own modes, and it's super powerful because it's got keystrokes, navigate to like any line very quickly. It's super efficient, and just like it's kind of like the command line of editors because you can edit any command you want, but it also takes learning curve is also very high. But for our class, we don't have a use case for Vim really because we do everything in Xcode. Just know that it's possible. It's there. If you guys are interested, I can post some of the common command line Vim shortcuts, but I don't know if it'll come in useful for the context of this.
What does VIM stand for?
Don't know.
Something improvement.
Huh?
Something improvement.
Oh no, let's Google it. I know this.
What's VIM stand for?
Volunteer. Yeah, I don't know. I know the original is VI.
Been my editor for Linux. Just kind of crap that I get. Like Google stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it stands for anything, to be honest. V for visual.
Visual improvement. VI improve.
Anyway, bring it back in. Okay, so we have this folder called mob-git. Oh. All right, and I have these two files here. So before we jump into Git, any more questions of command line? How do we change directories?
CD.
Yep. How do we list files? ls. L. Yeah. I usually, when I'm exploring with ls, I usually do ls-al to list all files with more information. How do we go back directory? CD period. How do we create directory?
MPID.
Create data. Yep. Remove directory.
RM.
RM.
RM, the file name.
RF.
RM.
Yeah. To remove a file, just rm, right?
Yeah.
To create a file, touch.
Touch.
And then bring our current directory.
PWD.
PWD. Cool, nice job, guys. So now we should be able to navigate and find our current working directory for our class, right? So let's do it. Let's actually really quick move out of this. We'll come back to this directory later when we explore stuff. But let's just for practice go into our class folder, our class repository. So I don't even know where mine is, to be honest. We'll have to explore here.
In source tree or in the Finder?
In the terminal command line. There we go.
Okay.
Mine's gonna be different than yours, by the way. My directory.
Do you have to get back out to your home folder if you change directories to anything?
Yeah.
You can't just go from like your git.
You can if you have the exact path.
Okay, so how did you find the directory that you want?
Because I remember what it was. I remember it was in my home directory, then mob. So you gotta remember what the directory is. What was the easier way of getting there? Of if you have it in Finder? Yeah. Drag and drop. Also, when we're working with moving around, remember tab is your friend. Always use tab. Otherwise, I get very, very tiresome, very cumbersome.
Is there a way to configure the colors to highlight directory versus files?
Yeah, as a bash profile, I'll post that
Okay.
in the next couple of days. Are you guys interested in a color scheme for bash? Yeah.
Is that how you change what it says Telecom to add there?
Yep. Yeah, so everything I've configured, right? I configured my color scheme. I configured the message it gives us here. And I've also configured it so if my current directory is a Git directory, it tells me the branch I'm on, right? How cool is that? So we're our working directory, right? And we know that our class folder is a Git folder, right? It's being washed by Git. So if we do an ls-a, we'll see there's a folder there called .git, and everybody should have this. Yep, so that's where Git is backing everything up. That's where it's keeping its cache and its history. So if you ever wonder if a directory is being washed by Git, the root of the parent folder will always have .git. Now let's jump into Git, change tracks a little bit. For us to see if a directory is being washed by Git outside of the Git, because we might be in a different folder like lessons, and do ls-a here, and we don't see .git, right? Because only the parent directory has .git. So for us to see if a directory is really being tracked by Git, is going to do a git status. Now, git status will tell us pretty much the status of our directory, if we've edited files, if we make changes, if there's Git at all enabled in our directory. So git status tells us everything to know about our current status of our project. However, if I was in a different folder and I did git status here, it will tell us not a Git repository if it's not being washed by Git. So in terminal, everything that we do with version control with Git will be prefixed by the Git keyword. So remember that everything we do will be Git and then a command. So I want us to take a second and just do a quick review of Git before we jump into the commands for Git, just so we have the whole process fresh in our minds. the folks watching us. There we go. Cool. Okay, so let's go through the whole process of creating a Git repository, creating a GitHub repo, and kind of merging those two, and making changes, editing files, removing files, etc. So if I want to create a new Git repository, what do I do? What's the process so far? Yeah, so right now the way we've gone about it is we create a GitHub repo. We either fork it or we just clone it, right? We fork it if it's someone else's repository, or if it's our own repository, we just do a clone, right? Right, so what this does is this brings it, ensures that repo is in our GitHub account, or that we have permissions, right? So next, this is a step where we involve source tree so far, right? So in source tree, we clone a new repo, right? We have a little small dialog box where we press the plus. Everybody remember that? So that basically clone repo, we then enter the URL of this Git repository that we created on GitHub, right?
Yeah, which was generated for us on GitHub, right?
Exactly. So we clone the repo. Now there's a few in-between steps here that we're going to go over today. But before we go into those in-between steps, let's go over the flow of pushing, pulling, committing, editing files. So if I have a repository now in my own local system, and I add a new file, what's the process of saving the new file, committing my changes, and then pushing it to GitHub?
And if you write a comment, what you did.
So if I have a new file, I have to first add the file, right? So commit is only if you make changes to the existing files. So git add file name, and then git commit message, right?
Yeah, but source tree adds the file for you. Right.
No, it doesn't. You have to check it for it to add it, remember?
Right, okay.
And then we need to push, right? So then we do push to origin, right? Origin is our own version.
No Git in front of it.
No git what?
No Git in front of push.
Yeah, so we git push origin, but I want to, the syntax for this is a bit different, so I don't want to go worry about the syntax, I just want the flow at a high level initially, right? So if we get a file, we do git add file name. If we commit, we do commit with the message, and then to push, we do push, right? If we don't add a file, we do commit and push, right? So far we've gone through these flows. Now to sync up with our remote, we also edit the remote, right? So edit remote. For what was the repo, the main repo that you guys are pulling from? Upstream. Right. So now we have two remotes. We have upstream and we have origin, right? So upstream you can only pull from, you guys are all familiar with. Origin is where you sync your files to, right? So far, none of this is new, right? It might be a bit of a refresher, but these are all things we're familiar with, right? Okay, so in between here, there's a few things that are kind of being assumed, and a few things that we're kind of conforming to source tree and GitHub. So for us to create a new Git repository, we don't necessarily need to work with GitHub right away, right? We can just create the Git repository, commit our changes, and then tie it in with GitHub, right? So far, we've been on the mercy of GitHub creating a repository, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can create the Git folder, then create a Git repository, and then sync this with that, right? So the step that we haven't gone through is into Git initiate, and that's not exactly the keyword. The keyword is init, a new repo, and then we go through all these. However, if we initiate a new repo, we have to tie it to our GitHub repository, and that's called a remote, right? When we have different places we're tying it to. So then we need to add a remote to sync with. So now this remote could be either GitHub or any other service. We're no longer tied to GitHub. However, for this class, we're all going to work with GitHub. So I'll go through the whole setup.
So is Git like, did we download something originally to get Git on our hard drives?
SourceTree did that for us.
Okay. So it's like an entire sort of framework of some kind. It's like always.
It's its own tool.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure if it was SourceTree or if it was Xcode tools. That was one of those two.
Yeah. Because Xcode has a plugin for
They
Git,
do.
right?
It's not very good. Cool. So let's take this and build something from scratch. But anybody have questions at high level about how this works? So this step is the one it's gonna take a bit of getting used to because we're gonna do it in reverse. We're not starting from this step, we're starting from this step now. But everything else is the same. We add, we commit, we push changes, we pull changes, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So if we like wanted to create like our own repository for just like other projects we're working on.
Yep.
The process, we have to go to GitHub first to create something online.
You can go either way. You can start locally,
Okay.
or you can create it in GitHub first. So we'll go through both use cases today.
And you always point Git to some directory, right?
Yeah. And remember, so this is actually a good point. For Git, whenever you do a Git init, where you have a repository being watched by Git, all directories within that will be watched by Git, right? And Git cannot watch past its directory, right? So we cannot do cd period from a Git directory and have Git watch that directory, right? So Git is only the current directory that the Git folder is on, and all subdirectories. Cool. Let's do this. All right. So I want to go back in my new folder. We create a folder under our main home folder. I called mine mob-git. So I'll go into mob-git. And we have 2 files in there. Is everybody here? So if I do a git status, we'll see that there is not a Git repository on here. Now, this first flow we're going to go through is creating a Git repository from your computer and then syncing it to GitHub. The second one we'll go through is creating a GitHub and then cloning it from your machine. So we're starting from 2 entry points. This entry point is starting from scratch in our own machine. So Git status tells us there's nothing in there's no Git watching anything in our current repository. So the way we initiate Git is to do git init. And this tells us that Git will now start watching this directory. So if I do a ls-a, we now see a .git folder created here. So git init we do only when we create a new folder from scratch in our local repository, when our entry point is our local machine. So if I do git status now, we see it's a Git repository, and Git tells me that I have these 2 files that are not being tracked, right? So it recognizes there's new files in the folder because we haven't told it to watch those files. So what's the first step if we have 2 files it doesn't recognize? We add them, right? So there's 2 ways to add them. Do git add, and then the file names. But if you have a whole bunch of files and folders, it's very cumbersome. I'm lazy, and I always do git add period, and that adds all new files in the current directory.
Space period.
Space period.
It adds all the files in the directory.
That are not being watched, yeah. So the period is it's pretty commonplace for our command line stuff. Remember the open period, it opens like the whole folder, the whole file. Period is used throughout all of our terminal. So I do git add period. And if I do a git status again, these are now recognized as changes, right? These are no longer new files. So it is now tracking that these are new files, right? So I want to commit my changes. So what's my next step? Yep, so do git commit, then -m for message. And then I'll say in quotation marks, first commit. So remember, the dash is important for us to add a message to commit. We can commit with no message, but you always want some kind of message in your commits. It has to be in parentheses, yeah. One thing I used to do way back in the day, when I got I've gone through different points in my career. I've done agencies, companies, owned companies, freelance. When I did my freelancing thing for a couple of years, I used to always use Git no matter what, or Subversion or something. But I got really lazy in my commit messages. I used to do commit and then blah, 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 just like a whole bunch of crap. And then there's been times where I had to go back in time and I couldn't figure out where to go back because all my messages didn't make sense. It was all like, like that, because I was lazy. So it's important. It might take like 5 more seconds now, but it's important later to have a message that commits. Yeah.
I didn't get the new files, and I did the git add to the period, and it did not.
Okay, that's it.
Just kidding.
I did a list instead of the status.
Ah.
I just listed them.
You remember any Git operation you ever do the Git starts with the keyword Git. So now if I do a Git status, it'll tell me nothing to commit. Our directory is clean.
So the -none is your message that will be in your commit file.
Yep. So I'll make a change here. I'll create a new file called readme.md. So MD means Markdown, and GitHub, all the files, like if you have a repository that has instructions at the bottom, those will always be in an MD file. So if you want to have a README file for your GitHub repository that automatically displays as soon as you go on the GitHub page, that's to be named readme.md. That's a good question. README is usually in all caps. MD is usually doesn't matter. It should work either way, I think, but it's usually in all caps.
You can check if it actually works with your LS.
So I do git status, and it tells me I have a new file. So let's go through the process of saving this. Could someone walk me through this?
Git commit.
Git add. And then I can either do readme or period. I'll just do period. Now, there are instances where you shouldn't do periods. Say you added like 5 new files, and one of them is meant to, you don't want to watch just yet. Maybe it's your notes for yourself, you don't want to share the team. That's a use case where you don't do period, you just add the specific files. And then after add,
Git commit.
git commit what?
Dash,
Yeah.
So when we're adding files and we're using Xcode, like if we're starting a project, Xcode's gonna have a lot of folders inside, files inside folders and stuff.
Yep.
So like if I'm adding those, is it recursive if I use the
Yep.
period?
It's recursive. Good
And
question.
then if I don't use the period, then I have to go in and add every single individual file and folder.
If you can add the owning folder,
Okay.
and that should add everything within that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you added the new file with me, right? So you just did touch readme.
Yep.
Why would you put Git in front of that?
I did touch readme, and then I did git status.
Right, but since you added it to Git, would you do Git space touch?
No, so you create the file, then you add it to Git to be watched. So you do git add, right?
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
So the process is create file, add to Git to watch it, and then commit. So again, if I do git status, clean, right? So I'll make a quick change to this. Don't follow along because I'm going to go into Vim really quick. But I'm going to make a change to README. And I'll say mob git class demo. So in Markdown, the two pounds mean a heading 2. And who wouldn't know that?
Totally intuitive.
Okay, so now if I do a git status, I edited the file. It says my README file is modified. So what's my step here? Git commit. Okay. Cool. Everyone clear so far?
In terms of like Git, so is it actually? I mean, obviously there's a Git file in there, but because it's not connected anywhere, it's not actually moving somewhere else now, right? It's just sort of it's like preparing yourself.
Just sort of local. Yeah. So
So right now you've got 2 versions of readme.md on your local
Yep.
drive.
So I can do a git history, git log, and it gives us a history of our changes. I have a short key for, I have a bunch of them actually, yeah.
Git log.
Yeah, it's my own short key for like a condensed version. And I have another one as well, which I haven't used in a while. Okay.
So those aren't commands.
Git log is a command. Git log is the default to view your history. So if you ever need to refer back to something, this is the address that you refer to it by. The commit line.
Oh.
Cool. So now let's go through the process of creating our GitHub repo and then syncing our local environment to our GitHub repo. So let's let's go to our browser and go to GitHub. Make it a bit larger. And then in GitHub, you guys should be familiar with this. I go to create new, and then new repository. I'll call this mob git local demo. It's a handful. Create new repository. All right. So after you create the repository, you should get this right here. And don't copy anything yet. So everybody have this? Cool. So you'll see that GitHub gives some directions for creating a file, editing our README, and so on, right? However, we're not interested in this because we've already done this. Our use case is we create something from scratch. So what we can do is we've already initiated, we've already added, we've already committed, right? So the next step is we have to add a remote repository, right? We have to tie this repository to our local environment. The way we do that is we add a remote. And the one I'm going to copy, the address is this one right here, github.com, username, directory name, .git. So go ahead and copy this right here. It's okay, yeah. So there's two ways. HTTPS uses HTTP protocol, which we'll go over later in the class. Git is another, they're both secure connections. Git has its own kind of way of connecting to its own tunnels, which is through a safe terminal, a safe tunnel. Now, you guys might be asked for a password as we do this, for username and password, but let's give this a try first. So in our command line, let's do git remote add. So it's saying, hey, Git, add a new remote location for us to sync this with. And this is where we'll give it a name, and we'll call this origin. Again, the name, going back to our first and second classes, origin is just nomenclature. It's just a shortcut for the place we're pushing to. Origin is what we're referring to as, right? So origin is what we'll call in our GitHub repository that we're syncing with.
Our local property, right?
So in origin is, so we have our local, then we have our origin, which is a GitHub version. So we're calling that one origin. And then paste the URL. So we're saying, hey, in our local, add a remote repository where we're syncing this with, call it origin, and origin really refers to this URL right here. Right? So the way we check this worked is we can do git remote -v. And this lists all of our remote repositories. We can have many remote repositories. We can have GitHub. We can have another maybe work repository we're syncing to. We can have multiple locations. But for our purpose, we're only using GitHub. So it tells us we have origin. And you'll see origin here twice because we have two permissions. We have permission to push to origin and fetch from origin, grab from origin. Now, if I was to have upstream on here for your guys' class version, what would you see? You'll just see fetch, right? So yours and we'll go over it in a second. In your current mob folder, you'll see origin, push and fetch, and you'll see upstream just fetch, right? Because yeah.
And git remote dash v tells us what now?
The remote servers that we have access to. So you can just do git remote, and it just lists origin, but dash v just lists you, gives you the URLs, the exact addresses with your permissions.
Now, is that all the remotes that these files are tied to?
So now to push, we do git push origin master. So we're pushing our master branch, which is the only place we're going to be working for this class, for now at least, to origin, to the place we created.
So master in this case is our local origin on our computer.
Not necessarily. So remember, Git has branching. You can branch off different versions of where you are. Master is like the main branch. So master is kind of like the main highway of where you're going. You can take sidetrack highway. Remember, we're talking about features. You can create a branch for like a login screen, a branch for like a checkout screen, and merge it to master. This allows us to work with multiple people at the same time. Master is always your main branch, your master highway. So for our concern, this will always be master for now. So master is our current track, and then origin is the server we're pushing to. So now if I go here, I should see my files, my README seems to be. I don't think I saved. Okay. That's why git commit and edit README text. So let's do a quick exercise. Why don't you guys create a new folder, add git, create a git repository, and push changes to the git repository. So create a new folder in your home directory or somewhere where you don't have git watching it.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, you guys are most likely going to be told to add your username and your password. Yeah, there's some directions you could follow. Let's do this right now.
I actually put it till they-
Here. Let's see. There's a shortcut to do this. Give me 1 second. Okay, so let's actually, before we do that, create just so we don't have to add our username and password every time we talk to Git. Let's go through the directions I can walk you guys through. So I'll post this in our chat room. So let's do this actually before the exercise, so we don't have to add our credentials every time. So click on this link and follow the directions. And I'll walk around to help if needed. Yeah, it said invalid and password. So that's what we're doing right now. If you wanna wait a second.
Yeah.
We can actually do this step before we do that, so I'm asking for that.
Check for existing, what's
So just follow directions. SSH keys is kind of like the permissions file we're creating to sync up GitHub with our computer.
Okay.
So SSH is a secure server protocol, basically that creates a secure tunnel between our computers and a different server. And what this is doing is essentially it's creating a very secret long key on our machines and a secret key on the GitHub machine. And we're giving our secret key to our GitHub. So when we make a connection, it doesn't ask for a password because those keys match up every time.
So since I'm actually in the user name category, I'm talking to it's the point I'm back here again.
Where's the directions for?
Oh, here.
So go through this one first.
I'm going to go to that.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yes.
I don't, if I type in there, it's going to type in the user name section. See?
Let's see.
Like, there you go. That's it.
Okay, so it means that you don't have a directory. So this is what you have to do. Yeah, so follow these directions from step
Okay.
two. Anybody have trouble with directions on the GitHub page?
This password that we're typing in doesn't need to be a GitHub password.
Let me see which one was that. So it's on.
Right here, your passwords. It says that.
Oh, for your idea, no, yeah, don't have it,
Very
yeah.
good, secure passphrase.
It's not very secure, but for my passphrase, for that file, I just press enter. This one doesn't have to be super secure, because it creates another file that's going to be a temporary passphrase.
So it says, check to see if I have these already.
Okay, so you do, yeah. So let's see.
Computer's giving us a fingerprint.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been asked to enter a file, which is say,
Just say that. So it's
I never know, I don't have to pretend because I'm hit buttons.
So you recommend us not entering passwords?
I recommend you
Yeah,
enter your
yeah,
password.
yeah.
I'm just saying, no, I do not enter a password for mine because whenever you do anything with SSH,
Yeah.
it's not a password to remember, and that all goes. That creates kind of like another fingerprint / password, so it's already pretty secure. So for mine, just press enter. But do as you wish. Let's see. What was the folder for your for bugs that we created? Was it under?
This is one I started.
What? Okay.
I think this one was.
Oh, okay. So you were done. You already had yours set up.
Okay.
Had you done it before?
Well, yeah, ask me for my username, I just typed it in.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Okay, so just remember that. Okay, so let's do this then. Let's start from. It might be redundant, but that's okay. Here, get it email. It might say that you already have that. If it does, please fix that. Did it give you a Monday message? Okay, perfect. It's just follow the directions and stuff.
So I got this.
Yep.
And then I'm about to paste this in, just to make sure it's correct for me. Do we need to replace what's in the blends with my personal information?
Nope, that's all good. Yeah, that's good. Make sure you click there. Yep. And this is a whole bunch of foreign steps. Basically, you're just creating like Rob said, a fingerprint, and you're just syncing the fingerprint to GitHub. I'll be back and get some more coffee. There's actually two commands I just forgot we need to cover, but we'll go over Git first. We need to copy files and move files and folders.
Done. I
Done.
don't really understand what we did.
That you will never have to repeat that again, so don't worry about it. All you did was basically create a connection between your machine and GitHub, so you don't have to enter your password every time. You basically have a fingerprint of GitHub, and GitHub is a fingerprint of you. So every time you do anything with your account, you can just sync back and forth without any further authentication. Yeah.
I have an invalid key.
Uh-oh. Let's see. So. Yeah, it's like, I just followed, all I did was copy the content of it. Again,
Where did you get it from here? I copied this part.
no, over here, I did this.
Permission to
So all I did was, again, this was copy contents of this file here. You copy paste it from here. So we copy paste from this file.
For the word is copy.
Yeah, so PB copy means copy to clipboard the contents of this file.
Oh, so this, writing this already copied.
Yeah, exactly.
I have invalid keys.
You probably have the same.
Yeah.
Can we delete this overview? This one is-
Okay, yeah, you can remove it. Okay.
Yeah, so run this.
Actually, yeah. So, did you do the PB copy? So he is, the one that's-
Oh, really?
literally, it's not a copy, PB.
With Twitter ban. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
Running that little line actually copied it to her.
So it's not very
Oh,
clear.
okay.
So last
I
time we
copied
did
it
was
up
the
here.
Yeah, I know. And then
PB copy. So all it does that they already copied the PBR clipboard. That's what it does. So then
Dude, thank you.
paste it there, and then just gives the title like John has MacBook.
Yeah.
So we got,
Sorry. Make sure to do that.
I got it.
Sorry.
Let's try and email that.
So the previous steps. Did you add your, did you do these steps right here, or you add the key to your? Yeah, so this one we have to do is go to your. So this is step you need to go there. So let's see if we already have, if you did step 2. We should have.
good stuff.
So nothing to do. Okay, all good. Yeah, that was the third step. Basically, you had to add your fingerprint to GitHub.
Okay, thanks.
Question.
Yeah.
So now that we have this connection, do I always have to, like how we created the file on Git and then we took our URL and put it in there? Does anybody just create that all in the command line?
No, you still have to create GitHub first. But this just eliminates the need for a use for username and password. So is everybody here?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions on these steps? There was a whole bunch of foreign stuff we did. It's okay if you don't understand the whole thing. Basically, the process was we need to see if you had the SSH directory, and this is just a directory where we hold our kind of like footprint, our fingerprint. We created those if we didn't have it. We had to add some information about ourselves when we created those. So whenever we work with connections, there's a username and an email account tied to our connections. Then next on GitHub, when we created our footprint, we had to tell GitHub the ID of our footprint, and that's what this PB copy listed, right? So this second, the SSH IDR setup hub, we're familiar with this directory, this path, and a file, right? This PB copy, don't worry about it. What this does is this places something in your clipboard, in your copy board, and this left caret signs means it takes the contents of a file. So it means the contents of this file are copied to our clipboard, and then that's essentially our ID. and we paste it to GitHub and it makes a connection.
So later on, when it says to check it, and it says I need to compare, I guess what I have, it prints something out, tells me to compare it. Is that same thing that I copied?
So where?
Here, so it says, fills everything out.
Oh yeah, so if you do SSHT, John is asking me about this part right here. She's asking about this.
Yeah.
So all this is doing is, it's making a connection to GitHub, and if it says you're all good, it basically just says, you know, you're identified and you're good to go. So what this is doing, technically, is it's making a secure connection to GitHub, and you can only make secure connections with usernames and passwords. So if the username and password wasn't synced, then it wouldn't say connection approved. But if it's synced up, if it has your information, it'll tell you something like, you know, congrats, or it works fine. So if I do this on mine, says I have access to GitHub.
So we could, we can delete that repository, add a new one. We won't have to do this again.
You will never have to do this again unless you get a new machine. So whenever you get a new computer and you want to authenticate to GitHub, you have to go through this whole process. Bookmark it. But I mean, it sucks, but it took 5 minutes, right? It's not that bad.
No.
To prevent you from having to type your username and password for indefinitely with this computer. You know, it's secure, it's
I'll be calling.
okay.
So on mine, I got the warning, they said I might get that the authenticity of the host kind of can't be established. And they said that I might get that. That's not weird, and that I just have to verify that this, whatever the number is, I'm not sure what it's saying.
So let's see. Okay. Okay, so the first time, depending on permissions, it might say you have to approve when you're local as well. Joanna's securities were higher, I guess, so she had to say, hey, yes, approve their connection, because it's 2 ways. Yeah.
I ran SSH-T on here, and I did not get a false one.
Get that. You got the same thing as Johanna. So it will just get it.
So I never, when I set up, I never did the push. And now that I'm doing the command, it's asking me for my user.
Try and close the command window, the terminal window, and start it over again. It shouldn't.
So this is one of us create a new Git repository and upload it to the cloud, right?
Yeah, so for the next task, let's do this. I'll write this down on the board. So create a new local folder, create a file called readme.md on local folder. Initialize Git locally. Add files to Git. Commit files. Push. Create GitHub repo. And then add GitHub remote. And then push files to GitHub. Hard to do.
I have a question.
Yep.
All my taxes are green. How do I change it to,
Preferences, and it should be Git right
but which one? I don't know.
here.
Like this one seems like it's
I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff we're not aware of.
You can put scripts, so you can do touch, like hello.jpg, and run scripts of the data files. I don't know.
It just says like happy Sunday speaks back, I thought it was for class.
Well, they have so many classes going on
And the answer that a whole big fan was not.
Oh,
Yeah, and you
so your text is correct.
What else did they do?
Don't try.
You know, what is it called?
Everything as it may be.
There's certain.
They're gonna,
Or the facial recognition.
they're gonna tie it to my
So
app
this is
store
not
app
really very much.
account
What's
and
that
track
This is
it
much, but this is.
using the IP manager
Or
to.
how to get like my files to show my.
Yeah, that's a description.
No,
So now
But you know,
go
someone
to
hurt you,
your-
hey,
your
you got
blind
comments.
text. Who wants to go?
No, don't worry about the blind text. My direction is the blind text, but yeah, just follow the direction that we're doing. Yeah, don't worry about the blind text.
I think I missed the adding of the when I said that.
Okay,
So I got all this, how do we share a file with someone? Like, what if I want to send this repository to someone? Like, send this link.
Yeah, send them the link, and if you want them to push straight to this,
Uh-huh.
you go to settings and contributors. And
Like I did for you in comments.
Exactly.
Do you want us to create a folder in Lockit?
No, because collaborators are only specifically used.
That's probably why.
Command line mode.
Well,
That's what I did. So,
So that, well, I didn't ask you.
so your message process was it using?
I got to.
I mean, that makes sense, it's only.
Okay. Yeah, so what we did was we went to
It's just like what we did with.
and created a repository.
Like, you didn't add everyone in the classes,
So to pull, just use the link, but we need someone to upload.
And then this gives us where our optimization. Yes.
It's the whole thing.
So great sense. So now if you go for repo,
Trying to add some gambling aspects to it.
Yeah, that's the only thing. That's part of
I added another view controller in there, spent like 6 hours.
So if
trying to
you
figure out
discuss
how to
this where we are.
push the data from one view to the other and realize
So you have
that.
So now to add a repository,
Yeah,
you
I
get
would have been
So, add,
So that's.
and then origin is what we call it. You call it everything from origin, just best practice for nomenclature for our cloud.
Yeah.
And then space, and then paste the URL. Yep.
Started.
Yeah. So now if you do,
Hard close it.
oh, so you already did that. Okay, but that was a step. So now if you do git remote
So I wanted
dash
to like
e,
set it up here where.
you see all of our repositories we connect to. So origin, you see that both privileges to
Like
push
those
from there,
users.
from there. It's not to push to your origin, you get push, origin. Yep.
But when I did the, I checked that again, it's
That shows the numbers right there.
So. Maybe step my name to the left and some shit.
That's it. I need to make
So you close this repo or this
Yeah.
terminal window, you open it again.
That's the best way to figure out. Like,
I didn't change those.
I don't think you should do it.
That's what it is. Everything on one view. It's just on the high end.
To the here, so.
And then the view is the work.
When you created a pronouns, did you add your GitHub email?
you press anywhere or just on the?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. And then you swipe on it.
Save for like 14.
Oh, yeah, it was up past it.
Yeah, that's right, right?
Messaging each other. It was up.
Yeah, Lord took me the longest time. I spent 2 hours trying to figure out how to choose the double tap. Like the color, and then I realized it was so bad.
Really good. So have you, did you use the like suggestions on just like setting up random numbers? Function 11? Okay. I was thinking about it, like playing blackjack, like that just eliminates probability of base cards on the card. Right, so like I added a couple more random numbers I can go to, and I just thought that like if it was 12, 13, or 14, it just turned out to be 10. So, right, because like if you're giving it like that kind of cards, the probability that
Yes. these cards are those
aces can be either 1 or 11.
Okay, so should I just
enter
I didn't really get it. Because what I was going to do next is that once I got all that, my next step is to actually put in a card.
Yeah, try to enter one line and see if it works.
So I'll do the time like that.
Or still get to information.
Where are you finding the images?
Just do it.
And would you just randomize the suit, or would you do like all?
Well, yeah, I was
spades,
just
or-
going to do one spade, one suit at first. And then like, so if I get one
I hope you just have to enter it once.
Yeah.
Try it. If you don't, then no. But it should have worked very well.
Yeah.
Should check this out. I don't want to.
So even when I was adding the folder, when you get in it and it completely.
Yeah, so you create a new folder, you get in it. Let me
Yeah.
check. So it's good.
So, I'm wondering, I thought you created an SSH connection, but
Trying to enter, Dave is doing the same, trying to enter just once and hopefully we're
I mean, honestly, this is like,
Where is it?
to
Dim
me, this is the
No,
only
it's just
way
like
I
get
feel
it.
about
Yes.
like any class, like,
Try and press up to do the last one.
This is the file.
So you can do
Yeah,
that.
did you do a lot of flow to make sure you don't log 2 aces in the initial thing?
Because you got to tell it
My
where it's
initial,
right.
no,
So the origin is the place and then
and
after
then we
this.
select aces, so we do that on the first video.
Yep.
Yeah, I just do blackjack logo, and then I just found some cards, and then I found
I actually
that
said,
table,
if
put that in there,
if
so
they
five,
bring
five,
it
four.
not very often.
So when you like.
If part 1 plus part 2 equals 22.
I didn't even try to.
Careful because you can get right, you might knock you out after a certain amount of times.
Because it got really complicated, I was starting to like, be like.
So I added.
When you log in, you turn log out, log back in and see.
It's stuck on.
Okay, what's that?
I hit add period and it's not letting me do more commands. That's what you
So.
just to see what can happen.
Try plugging.
Yeah.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the username. It wasn't the password.
I have one.
So where's the one? So this is the
I'm
model.
uploading our company's
That's the one
app.
I would
Yeah,
get
so our
it.
app is
And
also-
also-
see
Got
how
it.
it's
Ooh, wait a second.
trying to build it on there, but yeah, our guy just.
So I think we actually had to get to
Saved
your.
it. Yeah. I mean, this is all bug testing.
So you had to get.
We actually-
the folder.
Oh.
This probably-
This one is actually kind of like crippling.
So you didn't want to
Because
get in
we
it,
changed
you get
the
folder
structure
structure, you get it in the whole archive.
It was really sloppy.
Which is
but
okay,
it's
just making it
like,
this slow.
Problem is,
But wouldn't it be better?
anyone with older versions of our
Yeah,
app
yeah, you don't want to do that.
aren't gonna be able to communicate.
Start removing it.
Because the like
So,
JSON structure is so different.
You
So,
guys build it.
I built up
So-
adjustment to it.
it's okay.
Base code.
Okay, so carrying on your one forward, so here is where you can get in. Right, so now here you can keep making changes. Because you were in K, but there wasn't a different folder. So now you're in K, which is a different folder.
I
You
am
get in
a
it.
non-technical code.
K is
I
located
didn't write
under,
a line.
I got it.
But
Under your home folder, right?
I've been around it.
So if you go to-
Absorb the conversation we're having on our-
If you go to your home, you see K over there.
So-
right, that's where I created it.
So now over here, we also have, yeah. So get it over here.
So you, in, you wanted to create a folder, which I did under the home
location
directory.
is-
And then
So,
within that folder, K, I created another file called read.
We integrated with Meetup and Home, right?
Yeah, no.
It's like,
It's not always
letting
right.
people place conversations if they want, or place conversations, I'm pulling in like data from Meetup to place conversations. So
Okay,
like,
cool, yeah, so just follow the
think
directions.
about it, you go to Meetup, you open up our app.
Smells
Thank
pretty
you.
good.
Sorry, but yeah,
Oh, no
like I
worries.
said. It was less about,
So that all the way up to.
And so it lets you talk to
Right,
people
create,
about
when you use volunteer and the little-
Yes, exactly. I hear you have a Google Meet with Ledger, has it? Oh, that's awesome. Very nice. That is awesome, dude. Nice job.
I'm still looking over there.
Love it.
Did you get that,
So there's one more part of this, you said, how to.
Do it first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
treat something that
That's
we
the
didn't
part.
mess up.
Yeah. Oh, retrieve something you messed up. Okay, yeah.
No, like we did something and we want to get the previous version.
Yeah.
So,
Ah, we'll do this
I've done that too.
again.
Oh, no, I wasn't done that.
So,
You can
walk
walk
you
through
this.
you ask yourself, or did you?
It's your-
Do I go to apps that are out there?
No, I mean, like, I, because like I said, so, you are in the design space, especially when you're doing responsible design.
Then give it a name, so call it origin.
You know what you're going to do?
No, I did.
And then the URL.
You try to rewrite as much as of our app is like.
That's what I was thinking. I have a project.
We're asking.
And then you label. So
You need to programmers.
Yeah, but now that all.
So now
the,
you
like,
make
API
a
calls are built,
Right.
I see
And then
that
you
it'll
change
be
it.
a little bit easier. I just have to build the
So-
structure and then just tie it to our servers, like, I don't have to.
I don't understand why am I questioning?
Create conversations or chat.
So you have.
That's all being done on the server.
Tells us. Yeah, there's a few changes.
Yeah, there's-
You still gotta know what's up.
And then I mean, we've already did changes.
Right.
So
Well,
now
I
next step
mean,
is
I know.
you want to sync up your current folder.
Roughly what it is.
So what's the step
I
called?
know from like a high level, like where to find the API call and what it looks like. It's all.
Okay, yes, if you get push.
I don't know.
To the origin, which is.
A lot of that is from like a coding perspective. I've never seen it. So,
It's like defining, then you just.
Then, so that's the name here.
It's like, say, for example, you got a view, you do conversation, then you see the
the idea being like, by the end of this class, I'd like to be able to go up, find clients, like, say someone that's running a business, or like a music festival is a good example, right? And then build an app, a native app that shows like their own branding that incorporates our app. Like, so like, if you're
tried music festival, just like, I could add a bunch of content.
Yeah, you already did, so it's good now.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's good.
Just
So after you
Yeah,
push,
or-
read the lyrics, it's pretty hard to see.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have like this.
Yeah, we ran out of money actually, so we're trying to build that in SDK. That'll be our next step. The site that I like is, you guys, Yapwit.us. It's just a live feed of all the conversations. That's, you go to Yapwit.
This is what I was just saying, so you copy the URL from GitHub.
Yeah.
And you need to remove git space from that, space add, space storage. Space, and then git remove add.
Space.
Space add, space storage. And then you
We did it.
Space.
space and then
No, I mean, that's our app store thing. I just
Yeah.
must have been.
git space from that, space add.
Yeah.
Space storage, space URL.
Space add. space
Yapwit.me takes you to the app.
So let's do a quick 5 or 10 minute break and we'll wrap up Git.
Oh, yeah. I think it's been how you got to make sure it actually has the.
Yeah, Git status.
So like those are the people that are talking about. That's a conversation with probably more. The idea being like, you can search the word, eventually as we scale, you can search the word, but we pull up, you can see on our entire system, entire network, where people are talking about. A lot of the ones without any messages are just stuff that we put in, but
Almost. We got the 15 minutes.
So, for our app, I just sent out an email about version control. No one's got back to me yet. I'm trying to upload a new version today to the App Store. In the App Store, we've been really consistent about just like being like 2.1 or 2.2, 2.3 for any like structural changes, and then 2.11 for any like bug fixes, right? Problem is, the last time that we submitted it, it was 2.3, right? And then our developer moved forward in test flight. So the latest build of test flight is 2.4.3. And I want to submit to the App Store 2.3, right? Because it's consistent with all the other App Store uploads. Is that going to mess with our testers on test flight because they have future build?
No, that's why it's usually goes yeah, it's its own like, environment, its own sandbox.
Sure. So we should.
So do you think last week's answer tomorrow?
Probably not. We're only getting like one for this now, right?
You see this, that's it.
That's true. I hope not, because I'd like us to start
Can
charging.
you open this one?
Now's the stuff that's getting really fun with interactions.
Because it's like, it's really, really helpful for me to see the people's source codes because
Yeah, like I said, when you put the game up, it really opened my understanding with the rules. That's why I feel like
they,
Andrew, I also saw your comment about last night, we will figure it out.
Yeah, oh man, so yeah, all yesterday, every time I was about to send you a message, which would have been like 15 messages, I ended up finding what it was. So,
So in development, there's this term called rubber ducking, if you're familiar with it. So, very often, especially in working teams, you have a problem, and you go talk to your teammate to like help you work through it, because you know, any problem, the way you solve problems is just by talking out the steps, right? So you go to your developer teammate or just your teammate, and you start explaining the problem from the very beginning. In the process of explaining the problem, you're like, almost all the time, you're like, oh, I should just figure it out just by explaining the problem. I was able to figure out what the problem is because I was able to break it down, right? So rubber ducky is for us, for developers to not provide other developers until it's really necessary, is to have like rubber ducky to explain your problem. And then go into developer, because rubber ducky will almost always, you know, solve the problem because you talk to the problem itself. Almost every time, like one of my teammates taps my shoulder, I just listen, and before I say anything, they're like, never mind.
I was watching this interview with this company, I forget what it's called, but they're all technical co-founders and they just made the process so efficient and they have like a set rule in the entire company where like the developers get, I think it's 2 days a week where they're trying to solve one problem. And the only way to talk to them during those 2 days is 48 hours. So like it's on their own time. It could be 3 in the morning, doesn't matter. The only way to talk to them is with a 10-minute timer. And if your conversation goes more than 10 minutes, then you table it to Friday. And then they were saying that almost all the time, once it gets tabled, they'll figure out an answer somewhere. And so they like, and then the other 3 days, the developers aren't even coding. They're just doing like customers for, and just like doing other aspects of the company. And then, you know, if they want to actually build a feature, you just sit down and focus over a session, build it out. And then, that was really interesting.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Personally, I'm working on, there's this new like high-end, so the target rate is like non-professionals, 25 and 45 years old. It's like not a hotel, but it's like a temporary housing for, you know, like executives, young executives. And their mantra is, you know, don't worry about anything that involves your environment, we'll take care of it. So we're kind of building the app as well as the actual environment, where like they can set up laundry, they can control their lights, their TV, their door, give permission to their door with the key. You know, control their den. You know, there's like a social network where they can talk to other members. So it's like a virtual environment. It's a really smart kind of hotel. So the apps and all the hardware for that. That's a fun one. Another one is yeah.
From a hardware perspective, are you just using like Design View and all of the?
Yeah, we're buying stuff. We're not building it from scratch.
There's this really brilliant, like 17-year-old kid that pitched at the DC Tech Demo Days last Thursday. That, you know, his kind of stuff, it's just it was inspiring because he built like DC adapter or whatever, stuff that you plug into the wall that has a chip in it that's now making it connected to like your toaster oven and be connected just because you replace that thing and put something else in it.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. Everything in the hotel is connected with that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's scary. It was creepy. Yeah, we've done some of it in the past, like we've worked with Blasudo and done some projects for them. But Blasudo's weird because they're like, it's one parent company, but then each building have a business, its own business as well. So they implement some of our stuff in their locations, but not everything. Another cool one is like the competitor to LegalZoom. Targeted at American markets. It's a pretty fun one. Another one is then we might, I don't know, depends on whether we get funding or not. It's a point of sale service, so like check out the point of sale there. There's a whole bunch of competitors, but none of them really have open gates, and if they do, they're not scalable. And we have built a scalable prototype that we've done for some pretty big companies like Shop and Sweet Green. So we're at the point where we either get funding and like we spin out the sister company, or we scrap it and just use it as a service. It's another exciting one. Another one is there's a new Hilton, new Conrad Hilton opening up in DC. We're doing a smart wayfinding Hilton app that tells you where to find everything.
Are these clients hiring you as in business work, or is this one partnering up with them?
The low one, the venture. So we do both. We work with startups, and like a lot of times they pay us, but they can't pay that full price. So they give us kind of like implementer investors. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. And then some of them just pay us all our cash.
What's a good way to find developers, either new staff or
Depends on developers.
Front end, back end, and then mobile app.
And it depends on what level. Are you trying to find a CEO? Are you trying to find like, a developer?
I would say experienced individual, never really complicated.
Like Steam developers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's networks. I don't know if the networks are. GA is pretty good at this. Like, their WDI students are actually pretty good. Just networking, I guess, is the best way. If you really want to find someone senior, go to a meetup and practice the person speaking.
Yeah.
That's actually how I got most, when I was consulting, that's how I got all my gigs was, I would speak in the events as much as possible. And there was always a founder of the CEO and the CEO person.
Right. Yeah, because I've had people going to the DC meetup.
Now that's hit or miss, but very often if like, look for a technical topic that relates to whatever you're doing and target the speaker. And if the speaker doesn't do it, they most likely always know somebody.
I want to share.
Your assignment?
I'll make
Steve Rob, the address.
I'm not quite there yet. No.
Hey, what's your job situation?
Oh.
Do you work from home?
I'm CTO at my company, so I work from home whenever I have no client meetings. But usually I'm in the office.
So you this is your company?
I'm not the founder, I'm the partner, but I'm a senior partner, so it's kind of my company.
Yeah, there's ownership.
Huh?
You have ownership in the
I
company.
have ownership.
And do your programmers live all over the area or all local?
They're not all local. Local, we only have like 3 other ones here. We have programmers in LA, Seattle, New York. We try and keep everything local. Like all of our programmers are both web native, everything. They're all like full stack everything. And then if we want to specialize in something in particular,